Notice LT27. This is a notice that you might receive from the Internal Revenue Service if you've started the application process for an online payment agreement, but the IRS still needs additional information. We'll go through this notice in the same way that we normally do. We'll start with the upper right-hand corner, and we'll break down the parts of the notice that I think are important to keep track of. So at the very top is the notice number, LT27. The notice date is March 2nd, 2020. There's a taxpayer ID number, a case reference number, and a contact phone number. The most important piece of information here is this notice date, specifically because if there's any action items, such as completing this OPA application to request an installment agreement within 30 days from the date of the letter, then you'll need to keep track of that notice date. So within 30 days presumably means on or around April 1st, since March is a 31-day month. So keep track of the notice date, and then just understand if there are items that are requested, then you have a certain period of time. The notice will either give you the number of days until that action is due, or they'll actually put a deadline date, which you can kind of figure out, how many days after the notice date that action date happens to fall. On the left-hand side, we'll see the taxpayer information field. So it should be the name, address. You'll want to review this in your situation for accuracy. If you've recently relocated, you can update your address on record by filing your next tax return. The IRS will take your most recent tax return, and if there's different address information, they'll update your tax record accordingly. However, you can also, if you've just recently filed your tax return, or you know that it will be a while before you do so, or if you're expecting IRS correspondence, then you should either call the IRS at their 800 number. You might have to go through the phone tree, wait on hold for a while, but you'll eventually get to someone where you can validate your information and then change your address over the phone. Or you can simply file the official change of address form, known as IRS Form 8822. That's for individual taxpayers, or IRS Form 8822-B, which is for business owners. And you can submit your request, you can mail it in, and then the IRS will change your address accordingly. So you should allow, I think it's 4 to 6 weeks for that process to occur. But you'll want to keep your address up to date, because if your notice gets stuck in the mail being forwarded to your new address, then that cuts down on the number of days that you have to take whatever requested action the IRS is asking you to take. So keep that in mind to give yourself the most time. Keep your address on file accurate all the time. So we'll put links in the show notes to any forms and schedules that are mentioned here. So if you need the change of address form, we'll put links in the show notes to articles and videos we've created on that. So basically this is saying complete your online payment agreement, or OPA. Basically, it kind of outlines that the IRS received correspondence, or you contacted the IRS about your overdue taxes. You agreed to submit an installment agreement online at the IRS website. They have not received your installment agreement request, so you would need to complete your request within 30 days to make sure that you proceed in the next step. So in the online application, the IRS can't approve or deny your application if you don't submit it. So this letter is basically saying, if you don't submit your application so that we can consider it, then we're going to take you back into the collections process. So the collections process, it's important to note that anytime you submit something that the IRS needs to consider, whether it's an online payment agreement or an offer in compromise, or if you're going through the appeals process, the IRS temporarily suspends the collection actions until the resolution of that specific item. So if you submit an installment agreement, until the IRS comes back to you and says yes or no, the collections process is on hold. So what this is saying is your collections process is on hold, but if you don't actually submit your application within the next 30 days, we're going to put you back in the collections process, and we'll go through that route. So the IRS, what do you need to do? You can submit your online application agreement at this IRS website, or you can pay as much now as you can. And basically it shows, the breakdown of the tax bill. Taxpayer owes $69.33 plus almost $400 in penalties, plus a little over $1,200 in interest, for a total of just shy of $8,600. So this is definitely within the streamlined online application threshold. You can also complete IRS Form 9465 and the collection information statement, which is IRS Form 433F. We'll put both links to both of those resources in the show notes. So if you're unable to do the online application, then you can complete those forms and send them to the IRS within 30 days of the date. That either or, you don't need to do both. So you can either submit it online, or you can complete the paper forms and send them in. There is a payment voucher. If you do want to just send an entire payment, keep in mind that not all the address on the payment voucher is not always the same as what's on the letterhead. In this case, it is the same, but just keep that in mind that a best practice would be, if you use this payment voucher to submit your payment, you would make your check or money order payable to the U.S. Treasury. You should write your taxpayer ID number on that payment. It's also included here. So you put that in the envelope, and then you send it to this address. Now, in this case, this Austin office is the same as the letterhead, but I have seen notices where there are two different offices. So you want to make sure that you just use the payment voucher to send it to the correct office for processing. So if the IRS approves your installment agreement, they'll charge a fee. You can qualify for a reduced installment fee that either gets waived or gets reimbursed under certain conditions. Generally speaking, that's for lower income people, taxpayers. And you can request that reduced fee on IRS Form 13844. Again, we'll put links to resources we've created about that form as well. So if the IRS doesn't hear from you by March 12th, this is 10 days from the notice, and that's kind of odd. Generally speaking, you get 30 days because that's what they said. But so I'm not sure if this is a typo or if this is in accordance with regulations. But if they don't hear from you by a certain date, pay attention to that date, even if the 30 days might apply elsewhere on the form. So if I were receiving this exact notice, I would definitely be in touch with the IRS by March 12th instead of waiting for that full 30 days. And then if you contact the IRS via phone, you can update your address if you needed to, but you can also get clarification on when your installment agreement is requested. Plus, the IRS also keeps records of your phone conversations, so you can at least have that on file saying that you contacted the IRS. So the billing details here happen to be for IRS Form 941. So this is the total amount of taxes that were owed based on the tax liability, the interest, and then the penalties. And then all of this should add up to the number that we stated above, this $85.98.97. Doesn't seem like it does, but there are penalties. So the IRS is required by law. Let me backtrack on this. One thing that I would consider doing is questioning this double item right here, because it does look like it's a duplicative charge. So if I went back to this amount right here and I started kind of figuring out the payment charges, the one thing I would want to do is, kind of ask, how this tax period for the same form number, same tax liability, interest, and penalty is incorporated into what I can see as the additional penalty charges. So the first question I would have if I receive this form is this double billing for the same penalty, for the same tax liability? How do we resolve this? So that's just me. And again, these are hypothetical examples, but keep on the lookout for, if you received this exact form, you could have a plausible question here. And maybe this is a typo. Maybe this was for the 2013 tax year. That's why it's worth asking the question, and instead of just directly doing whatever the IRS is telling you to do. So if you have a question, open that dialogue, get that phone conversation documented in case you need to dispute this down the road. This section talks about how penalties are calculated. Basically, a 0.5% of the outstanding tax balance for each month or part of a month that you have not paid the tax. That penalty cannot be more than 25% of the total tax bill. You can request removal or reduction of your tax penalties. There are a couple of ways that you could do that, or a couple of situations where that would be applicable. So if you had a reasonable cause, for example, a serious illness or injury, death of a family member, or you lost your financial records because of a natural disaster, that would kind of help you state a case for reasonable cause. You can also ask the IRS to remove penalties based on erroneous written advice right here. Basically, if you asked in writing for advice on a specific issue, you gave the IRS all the information and it was accurate, but they had all the information they needed to give you advice on the topic. You actually received that advice and then you implemented that on your tax return. If the IRS turns around and penalizes you, then you can request an abatement of that penalty, when you show that you did exactly what the IRS recommended. And then a third thing that's not on this form is there's a program known as first-time abatement. So if this is your first time ever receiving penalties for failure to file, failure to pay, or a long list of other tax-related penalties, then you can request abatement and the IRS has wide discretion to consider abating the penalty. So in a prior life, I did work with clients one-on-one, and my first client came to me with 6 figures of tax debt and about $10,000 or $12,000 worth of penalties. We walked through the abatement process and we were able to get the penalties removed from their tax bill as part of their payment plan. So that's on IRS Form 843. We'll put links in the show notes to that. So abating interest isn't as straightforward as abating penalties. However, if you do have a reason for the IRS to recalculate your penalty or your taxes or your penalties, for example, if the IRS looked at this and said, yes, this is a duplicate line item, we're going to remove this, then they would also remove this additional interest that's based on this tax item. If they removed any of these penalties, they would also remove any of the interest that was calculated on top of that penalty. So you're not going to get a full abatement of the interest if you still have outstanding taxes, but you can get the interest removed from any taxes that you shouldn't have had on the ledger in the first place, or any penalties that end up being abated. and the IRS is responsible for recalculating that. So do pay attention to that. There's some additional information here, basically some ways to contact the IRS, and some additional verbiage. What we're going to do is we're going to go to this link on the IRS website and see if there's any additional information. So basically there's the information that's outlined in the notice, other opportunity or other, I guess, alternatives to just submitting a payment plan application, and then some frequently asked questions, as well as tips for next year. Consider increasing your tax withholding. Okay, so not a whole lot of additional information here, but whenever you receive a notice, there's usually a link to the IRS website to a specific page with more information. So I think we've covered everything we need to in this video. As I mentioned, any forms that were mentioned in this video, we'll put links in the show notes to articles and videos that we've created about them. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our channel. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another topic that you'd like to see in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.